Hi everyone, this is Chapter 3, Ethical Issues in Counseling Practice for Counseling 4500. All right, let's talk about the different types of ethics that exist. There's mandatory ethics, aspirational ethics, and positive ethics. So let's first describe mandatory ethics, which is the minimum level of professional practice. So that's whatever you need to do so that you don't get into trouble, right? So we need to make sure that you at least do that much. Second one is aspirational ethics, which is higher level of ethical practice that addresses doing what is in the best interest of your client. And that's something that we hope that you all aspire to. So aspiring when it comes to that is like shooting for the best, hoping for the best, right? So when you're doing ethics, you want to also do the best, the most that you can. Do you always end up doing it? Not necessarily, but what we're hoping is that you're going to keep on trying to reach for those goals. Positive ethics is wanting to do their best for their client rather than just meet the minimum standards to stay out of trouble. And that's usually something that most of us or most beginning students will say, it was like, I just don't want to get in trouble, right? But no, as you go into this field, we hope that you will realize, let's do more than just that. All right, putting clients' needs before your own. Whose needs are being met in this relationship? My clients or my own? So, why are you doing therapy? Is it to help other people or is it to make you feel good and powerful and stuff like that? It is fine for us to meet our personal needs through our professional work, but it is important that we keep these needs in perspective. So, again, kind of like be humble, right? So, it's great that you feel like you're helping society. That's really good, right? Focus on your clients. That's the best part. That's probably the most rewarding. And so, really, the reason why you're even in this field, I hope. All right, ethical decision making. Guidelines for responsible practice are provided by each professional organization. Must be thoughtful in how you apply judgment when you're interpreting ethical principles in each situation. So, whatever field you're in, typically a professional field will have a code of ethics or two. So for us, usually we're going to go with the ACA or the American Counseling Association. They have a code of ethics that we usually will study, but we also have the CRC code of ethics as well, Certification of Rehab Counselor, CRC. So they will not spell out every scenario. What they're going to do is they're going to say, this is how we believe you should treat people in this situation. Right? And so from there, you apply your own situation into this and see what the best decision would be that will help your clients. Okay. Must be aware of the consequences if working in ways that are not supported by your organization. So as you work at an agency, you need to know exactly what their protocols are. And you need to study it and then also go along with it if you're working with them, because you could lose your license to practice or you could get fired if you're going against how they resolve problems with their clients. The role of ethics codes as a catalyst for improving practice. Catalyst is just a fancy word for starting something, a reaction, basically, right? So, number one, you want to educate counseling practitioners and the general public about responsibilities in the profession. So, even though, let's say, someone has a really good way to resolve a problem, it might not be actually considered ethical within the counseling field. So, you can say basically, well, we can't really do that because that goes against certain things when it comes to how therapy works. Okay. Two, basis for accountability. So that is about being responsible and taking responsibility for your actions. Three, clients are protected from unethical practices, which basically means that whatever you do, you need to do it in the best interest of your client. You cannot hurt them or do no harm. Four, provide a basis to improve the field. So you might actually discover new ways of resolving a situation, and you might share that either through research, like doing surveys, or maybe presenting them, or something like that. Would you rather self-monitor or have someone watch over you at all your decisions? Usually that's considered like micromanaging, and usually most of us do not like that, right? So we hope that if you're working in an agency, that you're going to behave in an ethical manner of this field, of this profession. Okay, we're not going to go, why did you do this, why did you do that, for every little thing that you do, because we expect that because you're educated, you're experienced with your internship, that you are making the right decisions. But sometimes the situation might be a little more than you can handle. And then, of course, you can talk to other people and then we can try to work on it together. Since there are lawsuits, some practitioners are worried and only provide basic minimum rather than what is right for the client. So remember, we talked about before, some of you will just do minimal ethics, whereas other people will do aspirational ethics. Again, we're hoping that everyone does aspirational ethics. So how can we prevent clients from suing us? Obviously, we can never guarantee 100% that they will not sue you, but here are some things that if you do, that are recommended, it's less likely that your client will sue you. So to prevent lawsuits, number one, show the client you respect for that person, the respect for that person. So as you work with them, you're always going to say, I respect you, and I believe in you, and we're working together. Let's see what's happening and stuff like that. And usually that means that the client goes, well, my therapist did try to help, right? It's just the situation didn't turn out the way it needed to be. 2, their welfare as a central concern. So whenever you always let them know that you're trying to do everything for their best interest, right? And if they know that, then they're less likely to sue you. 3, practicing within the framework of professional codes. So again, you know what your abilities are and what you're qualified to do, right? So if you know and you share it with your client, then they'll believe you and then, you'll be good. But if you go outside of it, your client might go, well, I thought that, that person knew what they were doing, but apparently they're not. Why are they even doing this right now? Maybe they should be a therapist. Maybe they should lose their license. So these are things that you want to think about. Ethics are not rules for every situation that you will encounter, like we said before. Guidelines to formulate sound reasoning and best judgment possible. Here are some steps in making ethical decisions. Number 1, identify the problem or the dilemma. Is it ethical, legal, professional, clinical, or a moral issue? 2, identify the potential issues. Is it a rights that has been violated? Responsibilities of each person, what's going on there? 3, look at the relevant ethics codes for general guidance on that matter. Like we said before, we usually will use the ACA and the CRC. 4, consider the applicable laws and regulations and how they bear on those issues. So again, each state will have their own sets of laws on how to deal with a specific situation. 5, seek consultation from more than one source and then document it. So you might talk with your coworker, your boss. You might also reach out to a lawyer as well and see what goes on from there. 6, brainstorm various possible courses of action. 7, enumerate the consequences of various decisions. So that's just a fancy way of saying is think of all the choices that you can choose and what happens with each of those choices. 8, decide on what appears to be the best possible course of action. So what is the best for your client, right? And then 9, follow up with outcomes, document the course of action. So once there is a decision that's made, you want to see how did it work out for your client and you. All right, the right of informed consent. Informed consent is something that typically you need to do with your client before you start therapy. It will be usually the first meeting is when you explain the boundaries of what therapy is all about for them. So the basic foundations of creating a working alliance. Informed consent is the right of the clients to be informed about their therapy and to make autonomous decisions pertaining to it. Autonomous here basically means is that they make the decision to agree to do this, okay? That we're not forcing them to. Okay, because when you do this, you say, it's up to you. You're the one who's deciding to do this. This will promote active participation with them, hopefully. And then empowering them and building a trusting relationship. We have to think about the fact that not everyone has been able to make decisions in their lives. Maybe they were told by other people this entire time. So this might be their first time where they're making an actual decision for themselves. Informed consent typically has the following. General goals of the counseling. So we'll talk about achieving a goal. Responsibilities of the counselor towards the client. So what you're going to do, what's your job. Responsibilities of the client. So what are they supposed to do? limitations of and the exceptions of confidentiality. So everything will be kept between us except for, and then remember we talked a little bit about that before, which is, let's say if you're abusing a child or an elderly person or a person with a disability, or you're threatening yourself or whatever like that, that you will then have to call the police, right? So they need to know what they can share and what they cannot share, and what the legal ramifications are when it happens. Legal and ethical parameters that could define the relationship. Qualifications and backgrounds of the practitioner. So that is what is your education and your working area of focus. Fees involved. Typically you get paid. And how much is it? And how often and stuff like that. Services that the client can expect. So what are they going to get every time they come to therapy with you? Right? And then approximate length of the therapeutic process. So we might say 15 weeks. It might be 10 weeks. I don't know. It depends on your place of agency and also the situation itself. All right, can also include benefits of counseling. So you might talk about the perks, right, or the good stuff, but also the risks involved. The risk is that it might not happen. You might not be able to reach your goals, but you might get close to it, but you might not necessarily reach your goals just yet, right? Possibility that the client's case will be discussed with the therapist's colleagues or supervisor. So that kind of talks about the confidentiality area, especially with interns. Usually they know that your clients will know that you'll probably talk to your supervisor, your boss about the situation, and then also maybe with your classmates as well. Balancing of giving the client not too little information or too much information. So that kind of goes back to self-disclosure, right? We want to make sure disclosure of the therapist is when it's really needed and the right amount of information, right? Clients need to know what they can and cannot say in terms of confidentiality, which we again talked a little bit about that with, like, let's say abuse. When it comes to, let's say, abortion, and if you're under 18, there's a whole different set of rules when that happens because you have parents now, right? So here's a link if you want to, so you can see, and it's also different in every state. All right, dimensions of confidentiality. Confidentiality is the ethical concept, legal duty of therapists not to disclose information about a client. So whenever, let's say, a therapist is being called into court, they might say the words privileged communication, which is a legal concept that generally bars the disclosure of confidential communication in a legal proceeding. However, it doesn't always apply to everything. It does not apply to group counseling. Why? It's because all the other people in there, you might be able to guarantee yourself not sharing any of this and keeping confidential, but you don't know if their co-groups, in that group that they're in will do that or not. Right? We hope that they don't, right? And we talk about the fact that you shouldn't, but can they? They might, and you cannot guarantee that. You cannot control those people, right? Family therapy, same reasoning why. Child and adolescent therapy, again, if there's children who are under 18, a whole different set of rules happen when it comes to those situations. Technology also makes it very complicated because emails can be opened up by other people. It can be printed, it could be saved, it could be, all these different things. So you also want to make sure that everything is encrypted if you are working off of a computer. All right, to know when you are required to break confidentiality, refer to the state laws, organizations, and clientele. So like we talked about before, child abuse, elder abuse, abuse of dependent adults. So usually that means people who might have a disability, and then dangers to the self or to other people. So those are things that definitely your client will need to know in informed consent. Whether a client is under 16 years old is a victim of incest, rape, or child abuse. When the client needs a hospitalization, you might need to be able to say, let's say what kind of medication they're on. Legal court matters, again, getting pulled in, let's say for divorce, and one person is trying to get custody, they might go, oh, but my ex-partner was in therapy, which means that they're probably not mentally able to take care of children or whatever, right? So it can be a very messy battle when it comes to that. And then when clients request that their records be released to them or to a third party. So the only time that you can just openly talk about it is if your client goes, yeah, it's okay, you can talk about it. But you can't just say it verbally, right? You should have a whole set of forms where the client signs it and you sign it. It's documented so that everyone knows. All right, duty to warn is a really well-known case, Tarasoff versus, I believe it's UC Berkeley. And so I'll just tell you really quickly because on this on this slide here, there's actually an article about it that you can read. But basically, what happened was there was a student at UC Berkeley, international student, I believe, who sort of dated this girl or another student, and she was not necessarily serious as he was. And so they broke up, and then he started to get obsessed with her. He did a lot of manipulative stuff, and it's a really fascinating case that I think that you should read about, so you're aware of it. Tarasoff case. And so what happened was finally the client said that they're going to kill her. And so the therapist did reach out, but she wasn't at home. She was actually, I think, on vacation outside of the country. So she tried, and then the police actually did go over to him and kind of like asked him, like kind of did like a quick like checkup on him as well, mental check. And the police thought that he was fine. He didn't look like anything was going to happen. But unfortunately, when she did come back, he did kill her. And so there was a lawsuit, and that's what duty to warn is. It's like, if you know, as a therapist, you know that there might be potential harm, it is your responsibility, depending on what state you live in, to warn a person who might get hurt, right? So if you look at this map, it might have changed since the last time, but I do look at this pretty regularly, and this is the most recent one that I saw. So again, these are, the blue ones are, you have to do it. So California is part of that. The green one is duty to protect or warn is permissive. So you can do it if you want to. Yellow means no duty to warn. So that becomes a concern because if a client says they're going to kill someone, you don't necessarily have to do anything.